pathological is a very serious disease. And he said he's pathological. Somebody said he has pathological disease. That's a big problem because you don't cure that. That's like, you know, I could say, they'd say, as an example, child molester. You don't cure these people. You don't cure a child molester. There's no cure for it. Pathological, there's no cure for that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the news of the day, and of course that was from Aaron Burnett. He gave that 90-minute, some calling it a rant, at a campaign stop. Joining us now is Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard, ABC News contributor. Hello, sir.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm fine. So, you know, in addition to this whole spiel on Ben Carson, he talked about bombing the crap out of ISIS. He talked about the stupidity of the Iowa voter and the American voter to believe Ben Carson. I thought after the last debate, his plan was, or at least as evidenced by his performance in the debate, to tone it down to a certain extent.
Well, maybe Carson's success has gotten under his skin in the general sense that the Trump momentum is stalled out or maybe even turned over, you know, turned downward just a touch. So something got under his skin, that's for sure. I mean, the stuff on Carson is almost literally crazy. I mean, Ben Carson's life has been kind of an open book since he became a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins University. I think we would know if there were deep, dark secrets in his practice over 25, 30 years. He does seem to not have behaved in a pathological way, and in fact to have cured whatever anger problems he had as a kid, and he says he cured them by through a religious experience. And really, I mean, who is Donald Trump to question that? I mean, it's somewhat appropriate, I think, you know? I mean, so I think voters will look at that and think Donald Trump's the one here who's got a bit of a screw loose, not Ben Carson.
Well, let me give you Carson's response, which is way, he took the high road, and then we'll talk about something that you wrote over at you guys over at the Weekly Standard. Here's Carson.
You're a child molester. Do you believe he owes you an apology?
Well, I don't believe he called me a child molester.
He compared your pathology to child molestation.
Well, you know, I always find it a little amusing what people in the press like to say. You compared this, and therefore you said they're the same. I don't buy all that stuff. So those are questions we should ask Donald Trump.
Wow. I mean, that's as high a road as you could possibly take. How do you think he handled it?
I think it's very typical Ben Carson, and I don't know how much that's just the way he likes to conduct himself and how much it's a political calculation. It's pretty smart, but if you're Ben Carson, you want some of the people who are presumably going to start falling off Trump to come to Ben Carson. You don't want them to decide to say, well, I'm no longer convinced Trump has the temperament to be president, but you know, I don't like that guy Carson who was fighting with Trump, so I'll just go to someone else, right? So I think it's usually wise if your opponent is self-destructing to sort of step aside and let it happen. Now, you know, I thought Trump was self-destructing a few times before, and I've been wrong or at least premature in that judgment. But I've got to think this time the combination of, especially the comment about Trump and about Carson and the belittling of his own self-described religious experience is pretty striking. It's one thing if you want to, I mean, mocking people's religion is not a good idea in general, I believe. I don't think the Iowa voters will like that much, but especially when it's clear that Carson was a somewhat temperamental youth and then became an incredibly disciplined and admirable person who went on to this amazingly successful career. So whatever you think of the religious experience as a religious or theological matter, it's obviously correct. I mean, it's empirically true that Carson turned himself around, or at least found a path that was incredibly successful and apparently very admirable. And I don't know, who is Trump to say that I mean, so for Trump to question it is almost crazy. It's not like questioning you, say, you know, I had this experience 2 days ago somewhere, mystical experience, and I say, really? Yeah, that. But in Carson's case, the whole life was sort of followed from that.
But now having said all that, and that almost answers part of the question, obviously, you know, you've just explained what you think of Ben Carson and his personal story and his the kind of person and the kind of career he had. But you know, and you put this in the most recent piece at the Standard, that the Standard questioned the qualifications to be president of both Donald Trump and Ben Carson and said, how big a problem is it that the two top candidates aren't qualified to be, you know, may not be qualified to be president? Now you're reconsidering Carson. Why the reconsideration on Carson, not Trump?
Yeah, I wrote Carson that reconsideration before the debate, and because I think Carson is an impressive man, and I still think, generally speaking, the person who wants to be president should probably have been a governor or a senator or a military leader or something in public life. It would be unprecedented, really, in American history for someone like Ben Carson to become our president. But I do think over the campaign he's shown a maturity, just an impressive character that would take him a long way to fixing or to ameliorating some of the obvious inexperience he has. And then I quote in the editorial that Facebook post he wrote about where he said, you're right, I am inexperienced, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about how much the experience of the current political class is worth when they made all these mistakes. And there's something to be said for that, too. So I'm willing to, I say in the editorial that I'm doubtful about Carson as a president. I admire him as a person, but I'm willing to be open-minded on that. Trump, I just don't think has the right temperament to be president, and I would worry a lot about him in the Oval Office.
We have a minute left. What's going on at University of Missouri and at college campuses around the country?
And everywhere. I got an email a few minutes ago from a professor at Claremont in California. Total madness, total failure of the adults to stand up and safeguard their institutions and safeguard fundamental American principles like free speech and intellectual freedom and freedom from being subjected to physical intimidation and so forth. It's a total disgrace. But many of these are public institutions. Public institutions are governed directly or indirectly by governors, by state legislatures. And I think people need to step up here and say this is not just, this is kind of a weird thing that's happening on these weird campuses. These are campuses supported by taxpayers, attended by taxpayers' kids or by taxpayers themselves, governed directly or indirectly by state legislatures. It's a total disgrace. It shouldn't be permitted. It's really a fundamental violation, I think, of fundamental American freedoms.
All right, Bill, always great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Steve.
Bill Kristol, folks. The Malzberg panel is next. Don't go away.